Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 17th of December, and as always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information at 1-800-472-0391. That's the Alaska Weather Information Line. You can always find us on your NOAA Weather Radio and Marine Band VHF and weather.gov/Alaska online. On your phone or your mobile device, you can try mobile.weather.gov. And if you can't find what you're looking for, send me an email. I'm happy to help as I can. david.snyder@noaa.gov. Let's get right to it. The hazardous weather is back again for the central and western interior, Norton Sound, Kotzebue Sound, and the Seward Peninsula, and the Bering Strait communities at around St. Lawrence Island. For the upper Kobuk and Noatak valleys, 8 to 12 inches of snow is possible for the region, as much as 24 inches of snow as we get into the afternoon on Monday and into really all the way into Wednesday afternoon with a strong southerly flow coming up. For the Koyukuk and Middle Yukon valleys, 4 to 8 inches of snow with as much as 12 inches in some cases there. You could see some lower amounts for the upper Koyukuk and the central interior there. Winter weather advisories will be possible in that region for about 4 to 7 inches of snow as you get into the eastern areas there. That'll last again from later on Monday afternoon into early Tuesday. For the lower Yukon Valley, eastern Norton Sound, winter storm warnings are in effect there. Gusty winds, especially along the coast, may reach upwards of 50 miles per hour. With that, we can expect poor visibility at times on top of just blowing and drifting snow. The southern Seward Peninsula and the interior of the Seward Peninsula could see as much as 12 inches of snow in some cases there, starting Monday afternoon and into the evening hours and overnight into early morning on Tuesday there. Expect some of the northern and interior sections of the Seward Peninsula to see anywhere from about 4 to 8 with higher amounts toward 12. As we get out towards St. Lawrence Island, the threat for strong and gusty winds over 50, maybe 55 miles per hour is certainly there. Blizzard warnings are in effect there for the Baldwin Peninsula, Selawik Valley, the Chukchi Coast, as well as St. Lawrence Island. These regions you're talking about as much as 14 inches of snow on the worst side. This is going to start up pretty early tomorrow and last at least through about midnight, Monday into early Tuesday morning. Watch for some very strong and gusty winds and a decent chance for some snow to pile up in that region as a very strong southerly flow again sweeping up over the region. So St. Lawrence Island, you're going to see this first. It's going to spread northward into Monday night and Tuesday morning, and then eastward as we get into Tuesday for areas in the central interior. So here we go. And across the west, we're already dealing with high winds there. Those high winds will continue at least through the next 12 hours or so. Winds could exceed 70 to 80 miles per hour in some cases as they blow in from the south. And we're also watching for some high surf conditions across the Kuskokwim Delta, about 2 to 4 feet above high astronomical tide. That's expected tonight through Monday afternoon. So prepare for some strong and gusty winds and rain and snow in your area as well as some rough surf conditions there for the Kuskokwim Delta. Here's a look at the satellite picture on this Sunday, and you can see that broad circulation across the northern Gulf, a low pressure system here, another wave of that extending out across the Seward Peninsula, and the next big surge already working up across the western part of the Bering Sea. This is working its winds through the central chain, see some stronger gusts out there, and expect to see some more as we go through the day. For parts in southeast, we've seen some showers across the region, wave after wave kind of circulating out and away from that low pressure circulation toward the central and northern sections of the outer coast. Even had a brief thunderstorm, it looked like, passing through the Sitka region there. As you look out across the north and west, a little bit of a ridge taking shape across the west coast for now. It is only a brief break as that next surge of weather is coming in fairly quickly. The low pressure center down to 975 millibars, and it will deepen rapidly tonight. Periods of snow and maybe some brief freezing rain out around the Cape Newenham area. Otherwise, it's rain for the Alaska Peninsula, low pressure across the central Gulf, sending rain and even an isolated thunderstorm out towards Sitka today. And across the interior, a brief area of low pressure across the region is still kind of holding there in a stationary form. Some light snow falling across the region and blowing snow still reported up across the North Slope. As we get into tonight, you can see the setup here, a very strong southerly fetch moving in from the North Pacific across the eastern Bering Sea, heading for the west coast, and we expect to see blizzard conditions developing rapidly around St. Lawrence Island as you wake up tomorrow morning. Plan on that blizzard to last you at least 24 hours there and across the Selawik Valley into the Seward Peninsula, down toward the Yukon Delta region. Winter storm warnings and blizzard conditions should be expected with gusts in the 50 to 60 mile an hour range. In some cases, again, you're looking at about a foot of snow. Low pressure's down to 945 millibars there. Snow and rain will probably follow the rain and gusty winds that are passing through the central Aleutians tonight and tomorrow. Low pressure across the eastern Gulf will drag a front across southeast, and just outside of Prince William Sound, expect snow showers and rain mixed with snow across some of the lower terrain for southeast. Otherwise, a fairly diffuse system with not nearly as widespread precipitation as it appears to be on this map. Look to be watching snow showers across many areas across the Yukon Valley and up north. This will not be the big event. The big event is on the way as we get into Monday and Tuesday, with that frontal boundary working its way into the west, crossing over the St. Lawrence Island with some pretty strong winds there. Again, not a whole lot of any ice cover really around the island that we can tell, and with that strong southerly flow working up, any ice that is along some of the outer coast will quickly be eaten away or pushed even further northward across the Chukchi Sea. High pressure across the Alcan border sits at 1,024 millibars for southeast. A weak area of low pressure is still kind of finding its way out of the region. High pressure is not really pushing that out with any great force, so we'll see some periods of rain and snow generally around the central and southern interior. A lot of this will be pretty hit and miss, and a better chance that a lot of this will be rainfall as well. Out across the west, you can see the large fetch coming in from the west and northwest now. This will be much colder air working its way into the central chain. That strong southerly flow still parked right along the western coast, and snow and blowing snow will be found all the way from the Yukon Delta into the Kobuk Valley there in the Noatak region. Watch for winter storm warnings to continue well into Tuesday as a result. And you can see by Tuesday itself, the front is still holding together, it looks like, as it passes into the central interior. So winter weather advisories will be posted for parts of the upper Koyukuk and parts of the Tanana Valley. The central interior, they're looking at about 4 to 7 inches of snow as we go into your Tuesday. And still, it looks like snow and blowing snow may be possible for some parts of the west and northwestern coast into Kotzebue Sound, Seward Peninsula, and even all the way far south as the Yukon Delta. There will be some lesser amounts of snow around the Alaska Range and maybe even into south central. The winds don't seem to be as big of a concern the further south you go away from that low pressure core, which is going to be out across the eastern sections of Siberia and the Gulf of Anadyr. But if you look carefully out west, there is another weather system just beginning to make its appearance out across the western chain. This is going to be dragged northward fairly quickly, and there's an opportunity as we get into Wednesday night and Thursday, it looks like, once again for St. Lawrence Island and many on this kind of Bering Strait path here, to see another big push of wind here. So even after this first wave goes through, pay close attention to the forecast as we get into Wednesday and Thursday, if you're in St. Lawrence Island and the western end of the Seward Peninsula, maybe even the Yukon Delta, for a mention of some very strong winds, and pay attention to alerts and advisories as they come out from our National Weather Service office in the Fairbanks region. Let's take a look at temperatures quickly as we get into the beginning of the week. For southeast, a very mild start. Most places starting out above freezing. Exceptions could be Haines, Skagway, and Yakutat. South Central might have a cold night, down in the teens. Kodiak down to 28. Single-digit territory for Fairbanks and the Tanana Valley, and sub-zero temperatures for the North Slope, Fort Yukon, all the way west. For Kotzebue Sound, anywhere from 0 to about 10 above. Out around Shishmaref, 10 degrees exactly. 13 for Nome. Southwest, you're looking at mid to upper teens. The Alaska Peninsula, 20s and 30s, 32 in St. Paul with a high of 39 tomorrow. Mild in Fairbanks for wintertime anyway, low teens. South Central in the teens and 20s, 36 in Kodiak, mid to upper 30s, even 40-degree readings for parts of southeast. The North Slope anywhere from 5 to about 10 below, and mid to upper 20s for the Seward Peninsula. Overnight lows Tuesday morning, warming up out across the south and west, 20s and 30s for the southwest coast. Bristol Bay in the lower 30s there, near 40 in the Alaska Peninsula, 37 for St. Paul, 30 in St. Lawrence Island, 20s and 30s for southeast, and sub-zero readings from Barrow all the way into Eagle and Northway. Afternoon temperatures still mild across south and west with blizzard conditions ongoing. In some cases, a winter storm warnings expected again for the west. Pay close attention to your latest watches and warnings on weather.gov/Alaska.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
On to flying weather now. IFR conditions will spread along the front that's crossing quickly through the Bering Sea. It won't just be a ceiling and a visibility issue. It will be some severe turbulence as well, and we've got high wind warnings out through the Aleutians today. Expect those to spread eastward at least tomorrow, and don't be surprised to run into a lot of low-level wind shear across the west. We'll look at the turbulence map here in just a minute. In the morning, IFR conditions may be found across the Alaska Range. There's some opportunity for maybe a little bit of fog across some of the valley locations in Cook Inlet. Chances are it's going to be minimal, so maybe not as widespread as we show it here. As we get into the afternoon, that should improve, so I'm not really counting on a whole lot of that. IFR conditions will spread quickly from west to east along the front as it moves into Norton Sound and the Seward Peninsula, as well as Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula, as well as Nikolsky, Dutch Harbor, and Unalaska. For areas in southeast, look for MVFR across the central and southern parts of the Panhandle, some IFR across some of the higher terrain. Once we get into Monday morning, the front will still be pushing eastward quickly, and once again, turbulence spreading eastward with that as well. IFR spreads into parts of Cook Inlet, Kodiak Island, Bristol Bay, all the way up into the upper Koyukuk, Noatak, and Kobuk valleys, as well as the Chukchi coast and the south-facing coast of the Seward Peninsula around Nome and eastward into Norton Sound. By the afternoon, you'll see the focus for IFR spreading into the Kenai Peninsula, Prince William Sound, and into the Sitna Valley and the Alaska Range, as well as some parts of the North Slope. Southeast looks fairly clear by Tuesday afternoon. MVFR will be widespread across the central and western interior, as well as southwestern Alaska, and a large part of the Bering Sea, including the Pribilofs and Nunivak Island. Here's a look at your pass conditions in detail. Anaktuvuk Pass and Adigan Pass, we expect to hold at MVFR really through most of your Monday at this point. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass will be a little different. MVFR starts out in Lake Clark, IFR for Merrill Pass, but both of them quickly trend toward VFR as the day goes on. Rainy Pass, we expect to see IFR conditions in the morning with improvement, and same goes for Windy Pass, heading for VFR. Isabel Pass should see quick improvement throughout the day as well. Ventasta Pass, we expect to see maybe some patchy MVFR in the region, but overall VFR trends should prevail there. And Tanita Pass, like I said, some patchy fog may be possible in the region, but overall the pass looks pretty good during the daytime tomorrow. Portage Pass should be okay. Chilkoot and White Pass also looking for improvements, though MVFR will be found a little bit further south in southeastern Alaska. That strong southerly flow is pushing freezing levels higher and higher, anywhere from 2 to about 6,000 feet across the Bering Sea into the North Pacific. And you'll notice the remnants of their last warm-up is still holding on around Haida Gwaii, levels there around 2,000 feet. The surface freezing line through southeast and right up through the Bering Strait and St. Lawrence Island there as we start up our Monday. Icing potential is going up as far as the levels go. The risk overall will be fairly widespread across Kotzebue Sound, Norton Sound, Bristol Bay, Nunivak Island, and into the eastern chain, anywhere from about 8 to 10,000 feet. So probably flying below that. The trick will be, though, staying out of the low-level wind shear and the low-level turbulence. Below 8,000 feet across some pockets in the North Slope around Kaktovik out just west toward Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse. It's south of the range that jumps up to about 6,000 to 8,000 feet for the western parts of British Columbia, Yukon, and the upper Yukon Valley and the upper Tanana Valley as well. Here's a look at the jet stream, and a broad area of low pressure is developing out across the west again and dropping southwards, squeezing off this ridge of high pressure that is giving us just a brief break in the storm pattern here. Trough continues across the Gulf of Alaska with wind speeds coming into the Pacific Northwest at 150 knots. Wind speeds descending across the west coast right now at 130 knots. That is allowing some cooler, drier air to filter in, but it's that strong southerly flow that's really helping to amp up the next weather maker there as that crosses through the Bering. At 9,000 feet, you can see those strong southwesterly winds anywhere from 50 to 90 knots across parts of the Alaska Peninsula again. So high wind warnings and some rough going here across the west coast the next couple days. Low pressure still well west and south of the Gulf of Anadyr. Low pressure is west of Sitka and a low-level circulation here, anywhere from 15 to 30 knots. Not a terribly strong one, but an interruption in the flow. Westerlies across the interior are fairly light at about 20 knots, and about the same here at 3,000 feet. 10 to 20 knots are expected. Low pressure south and west of Sitka in about the same spot. A brief ridge here, 30 knots over Kodiak Island in the morning. And southwesterlies just cruising up the west coast, anywhere from about 55 knots at their weakest point to about 80 knots down around Unalaska and Dutch Harbor, and 50 knots coming in from the west across a broad part of the southern Bering Sea, Adak, Atka, and Shemya. Here's a look at turbulence, and no surprise, widespread areas of considerable moderate along the west, all of the Alaska Peninsula, the chain, and parts of Cook Inlet and Kodiak Island. Watch out for severe possibilities there for the Seward Peninsula, the Yukon Delta, and central and eastern Aleutians. Welcome to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service, and joining us today, two more people to talk about the augmented reality sandbox. It's Alana Valaji. She's a University of Alaska Fairbanks mechanical engineering student, helped design and work on the details to make this new type of sandbox there. Thanks for joining us, Alana. Thanks. And Courtney Breest, she's the outreach coordinator for AKwx, which is the experimental program to stimulate competitive research. It's a program funded nationally by the National Science Foundation, right?
Yes.
Okay. Alana, tell us about how you changed and adapted this version of the augmented reality sandbox. It's a really cool tool.
So Gina approached us with 3 goals for this new version of the sandbox. They wanted it to be compact in a light system that could travel around the state. They wanted it to be child-oriented, so we designed the sandbox to have 3 different levels.
Okay.
It's pretty cool. You can have younger children, you can have high school kids. I guess I should say high school teenagers.
Sure.
And then we also designed it to be more marketable, user-friendly, so that this could be seen eventually in classrooms all over the place, all over the state.
Okay. And you had a big hand in this, but this was a team approach, right?
Definitely. It was a really good experience for myself, for George Stevens, who we'll see later.
One of our hand models today. Yeah.
For 2 other members who aren't here today, Cody Klingman and Austin Hunt. And it was just a really good learning experience all around.
Very good. And this is something that is part of your learning experience as well, so you get to check a box in your education.
Yeah,
right?
it's a requirement for seniors of mechanical engineering at University of Alaska Fairbanks.
Very good. Very good. Well, it is a wonderfully inquisitive tool, fun to play with, and I hope to get my hands in the sand here in just a little bit. But it's also part of a bigger program, something that we were talking about a moment ago, AKwx, and that's what Courtney is here to tell us more about. What is AKwx and why do you need a sandbox?
Well, AKwx, as you mentioned, is a national program. We're funded nationally, but we're actually located statewide. We're at UAF, we're at UAA, we're in Southeast at UAS. And she mentioned, you know, taking the sandbox as an educational tool, and that's where I'm an outreach coordinator for the South Central test case.
Okay.
Our focus is on the Kenai watershed, and we are really interested in using these tools like the sandbox to interact with the students down there and get them interested in STEM and also communicate the research findings that we've been having throughout the state.
Okay. And one of those, as George and Eric are kind of changing the contours for us there from UAF to maybe something that resembles a little bit of something more of the Kenai watershed, which is one of your focuses for the study, right? And specifically looking at some of the changes there and how that impacts people and also the salmon.
Yes, it is all of our research is social and environmental.
Okay.
So we have social scientists working hand in hand with our environmental scientists. One of the things we're studying is Upper Russian Lake, and we have a researcher taking sediment cores from that lake. So one of the things we're going to use the sandbox to communicate is how the landscape changed over a long period of time, thousands of years, going from glacier, covered by glacier ice, to being filled with water. And then
that's what they're doing right now.
Exactly. So
live.
So they're moving
cool.
the water around. And then I think they've got some props over there, because we're also going to go a little bit more in depth and explain how the salmon got there.
Okay.
So using
and there's
these,
the salmon.
Exactly. Oh, I think there's a few more.
Yeah, we like more salmon in Alaska. More salmon.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really taking the findings from our research grant and just trying to connect with the community and translate it in a really hands-on and exciting way, so people can, you know, interact with us as much as possible.
Well, sure. That makes the learning and the science real and quite literally in your face, rather than just some boring black and white paper that you have to read about. This is something that people can understand better because it's visual and they're touching and feeling and seeing these changes, right?
Yeah, and get them engaged. And then outreach is a huge component, and working with the younger students, and actually even, I mean, working with the UAF graduate and engineering students it's a huge part of our grant, and we really enjoy it.
Oh, it is wonderfully exciting. And so, Alana, you were telling us that this is built to travel.
Right.
And this is built to do more things than version 1. Where can this type of project go in Alaska? And what can it demonstrate?
I mean, we were hoping to eventually get to villages that were harder to reach, that you couldn't necessarily move a whole fixed instrument to, right? You need something that can pack up, fit in your truck bed. I mean, one of the most attractive parts of this project is that this was going to be something that was used past our graduation point. You know, this is
Okay.
going to be something that lives in the state for years.
Right, right. Well, it looks like you're well on your way with that. So what are, give me another example. What else can this show us? We've talked about the Kenai River watershed. What's the coolest thing that you've played in the sand with? What's your idea?
Well, I definitely enjoy the props, but we also like kind of building up a giant mound, and if you put some water behind it, you can make a little runway, I guess, and
Okay.
you know, demonstrate the effects of the hydrology by just putting up a dam and letting it all pour right down.
Okay.
And so that could, I think you mentioned it earlier, you could even demonstrate the effects of a tsunami
Right.
or something along those lines.
So it's not just topography, but it's also hydrology
Yes.
and coastal surge mapping and some of the coastal changes that we're seeing here in Alaska, and seeing what the smaller changes in the sandbox might do to kind of a real effect of a slosh or a push of water up on the coast. Tsunami inundation mapping, or even glacial dam release, as some has been demonstrated before.
Yep.
So wow, that's just an impressive thing. That it seems like the possibilities are nearly endless with this, and probably even more ideas that are popping up in your head too.
Yeah, as we speak.
Very cool. All right. Well, if folks want to get more information about AKwx, you guys are online. You're on Facebook, Twitter, and on YouTube. AKwx, right? AKwx, Alaska AKwx, that is. And again, you guys are funded by the National Science Foundation,
Yes,
so
we are.
more to come from that, and a longer-term study there. Thank you, ladies, for joining us today. Congratulations on your hard work there. This is really fun. And for now, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with this edition of Alaska Weather Facts, and I'm going to go play in the sandbox there. We'll see you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Time for a quick check of your sea ice edge, and on this Sunday you'll notice a lot of the ice has been filling in across the Chukchi Sea, but a big change is coming with that strong southerly push we were just talking about, working through the northern sections of the Bering and into the Chukchi Sea. A lot of this is going to change. A lot of this will be pushed northward, and a lot of ice across north-facing coasts and west-facing coasts will be moved and pushed away from the coastline. However, places like Nome could see a little more ice heading your way there. It doesn't look like a big ice push at this point, but certainly you'll have more ice moving toward the south-facing coast of the Seward Peninsula. So watch for changes and watch for warm weather moving up the west coast in the next couple of days. Here's a look at southeast now. For Monday, northerlies out of the Lynn Canal, 30 knots with 6-foot seas. Light winds coming out of the central and southern parts of southeast, looking for 3 to 4 foot seas on the inside and kind of a variable wind direction there. Light winds across the outer coast and offshore flow out across Sound, 20 knots with a 13-foot sea. Northeasterlies out of Yakutat at 15 knots with 11-foot seas, 14-foot seas outside of the Dixon entrance on Monday. For Tuesday, a little bit more of a northerly push develops. Gusty winds in the central inner channels there up to 35 knots. Otherwise, northerlies about 20 to 25 with 4 to 5 foot seas in most areas. And a west-northwesterly flow down the outer coast, 15 to 25. You're looking at 8 to 10 foot seas on Tuesday. For south central, northerly winds in Prince William Sound, Cook Inlet, and all the way across the northern Gulf. Gusty winds may be found outside of Resurrection Bay and outside of Hitchinbrook entrance there, up to about 30 knots with 15 to 20 knots sustained, 8 to 7 foot seas there across the northern Gulf, and about 2 to 3 foot seas down the Cook Inlet, 9 foot seas as you get down toward the Barrens, and 3 foot seas inside of Prince William Sound. That comes up to 4 feet with an easterly flow at 20 knots on Tuesday. Southerlies start to push in from the Gulf, 25 to 30 with 6 to 10 foot seas across the northern Gulf, and about 2 to 8 foot seas across Cook Inlet, with southerlies developing in southern Cook Inlet there. You'll keep an opposing northerly flow light in the northern regions there with a 2 foot sea on Tuesday. Now out to the busy part of the state. Southerly winds across Bristol Bay, 30 knots there, 45 knots down the coast with 21-foot seas, all from the south on Monday. A south and southwesterly flow working its way into the western Gulf, 30 to 40 knots there, 20 to 25 on either side of Kodiak Island, still under the effects of high pressure with 4-foot seas inside of Shelikof Strait. Those come up sharply on Tuesday. 10-foot seas, a 30-knot wind from the south and west. Notice winds also from 30 to 35 knots down the Alaska Peninsula coastline. Anywhere from 12 to 19-foot seas there in the Bering Sea coast, and 16 to 21-foot seas down the Pacific coast on Tuesday. Now for the Aleutians, a much stronger flow here out across the west. Southwesterlies at 45 knots, 50-knot winds as you head out into the central and eastern chain. 45 knots south of Nikolsky and Unalaska. Stronger winds on the Bering Sea coast this time. 23 to 25-foot seas in the east, 26 to 31-foot seas in the west, and 31 to 32-foot seas across the central Aleutians there on the Pacific coast side. That's all on Monday, with high wind warnings in effect for the central chain. The winds start to settle down just a little bit on Tuesday with a west and southwesterly flow continuing. The highest seas moving into the Bering here, the red middle there showing seas anywhere from 30 to about 35 feet. For the coastal areas, look for seas ranging from about 20 to about 27 feet, maybe as high as 23 feet across the Pacific coast there on Tuesday. For the west coast, southerlies pick up sharply on Monday. For the Pribilofs, 50 knots with the 28-foot sea. The higher seas still to your south and west, and south and easterly winds sustain 35 to 45 feet, and seas ranging from about 20 to 23 feet there. On Tuesday, you'll notice that west and southwesterly wind moving in. 30 to 45 knots in some cases there. The highest seas, once again, 30 to 35 knots, or 30 to 35 feet between St. Matthew and St. Paul. And all of that, again, is moving northward and will affect coastal areas of ice. For the Bering Strait region, look for 30 to 40 knot winds from the east and southeast. Again, this will affect your ice in your area. 9 to 17-foot seas there in the open waters, and easterlies across the Beaufort, 15 to 20. For Tuesday, the winds come up 20 to 30 knots across the Beaufort, and a south and easterly flow 25 to 30, with seas ranging from 7 to 19 feet across the Chukchi coast. Once again, winter storm warnings and blizzard warnings are posted for the west coast. Blizzard warnings for St. Lawrence Island and parts of the Selawik Valley there, and the Seward Peninsula, looking at winter storm warnings, as well as the Yukon Delta, the Koyukuk, and into the Kobuk and Noatak valleys. This will start tonight and go well into Tuesday, even the midweek there, as this low pressure system is working through the Bering. Watch for some occasional rain and snow showers across parts of southeast. This will gradually fade away. It will be the focus for strong warming and southerly winds across the west coast, again with blizzard conditions and gusts upwards of 50 to perhaps 60 miles per hour in some cases, and another surge of wind coming your way as we head into Wednesday and Thursday, especially for some of our Bering Strait communities. So keep your eye on the weather. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather. See you right here again tomorrow.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.